All right, so we're starting back again. So we'll start the section about conditional probability. And so when we think about this concept, what are we like trying to figure out, right? So when we want to know the probability of an event, when we know the outcome of another variable. And so this seems pretty useful, right? We can think about like what this means, right? But this could be, in one example, right? Classic example is, what is the probability of pregnancy given a missed menstrual cycle? Or what is the probability of death given someone doesn't answer their phone? Or, what is the probability of dying if you've been shot in the head? Or the probability of happiness given you went to Disneyland? Point of all this, right, is that we are trying to find different kind of events, right? And so we symbolize this in a different way to illustrate these kinds of things, right? Because these could all be very interesting because we know that there is some condition attached to an outcome. And so oftentimes this is represented in an equation form, right? And the way that we think about this is, what is the probability of event A? So in these examples, right, event A would be pregnancy, it would be death, or happiness, given, which is symbolized by a vertical bar, not that thick, just for emphasis, given event B. In this case, this would be a missed menstrual cycle. This could also be doesn't answer the phone, shot in the head, or going to Disneyland, right? So this is the way we think about it. And so this is read as the probability of event A given event B. And so the way that we think about this, right, and the way that we represent this is that it is the probability of event A and B. And recall that this is the intersection. Oops, not what I wanted. The intersection divided by the probability of B. And so another way to rephrase this is the intersection of A and B. So this proportional to the probability of simply B occurring. So that's really, so we're looking to find dependent outcomes. So we're saying that death is going to be dependent upon someone getting shot in the head, or that pregnancy is dependent on a missed menstrual cycle, or that happiness is dependent on going to Disneyland, right? So that's really what we're trying to figure out. And so this is going to be very similar to crosstab analysis. So this is something that we've kind of mastered already. It's something that you should be very familiar with, and hopefully if you thought that was going to go away, turns out it didn't, right? But it kind of does. So there's a different issue that comes out, right? Is that how do we find like this intersection, right? So you'll recall that there's this multiplication rule. And for events A and B, so we're finding this intersection again for events A and B. This is going to equal the probability of B times the probability of A given outcome B. So that's one way for finding that. We can also see that if we wanted to reverse it, we could, and so we could also find the probability of A and B is going to equal the probability of A times the probability of B given A. So the formula is reversible, so we can find what the conditional probability is either way, right? And so it really depends on what we're trying to kind of figure out. And so there's another issue too, is that, so these are for when they're dependent. If we're trying to find out what happens if these are independent events, right? We know that these are independent if the probability of A given B is equal to the probability of A. So we find in this one, right, that this is independent if the probability of A given B just equals the probability of A. So like the probability of event B happening has nothing to do with observing an outcome. And the reverse is also true, where the probability of B given A is equal to the probability of B. And then again, right, this shows independence. So that's it's kind of like the gist of all this kind of stuff. So let's work through some examples, because I know, again, that this can get kind of like murky or whatever. And so we'll work through some in the next series of slides, right? So I'll see you guys in the next video.